My name is Earl Carlin. I was electrician's mate, third class. I was in the Navy. I was on the LCI 472, and I was in the Navy service from June of 1943 to December of 1945 when I was discharged. I have been at church, and I had to walk on the railroad 1.5 miles because I had a toothache, and I went in the house and I turned on a Majestic radio, and on it said, or President Roosevelt said, that it was an hour of infamy that the United States had been bombed by the Japanese. So a little while later, my grandparents come in, I told them, and they said, "Oh, that's heck." They said, that's about it. So I've got a letter from my friends and neighbors that told me that they didn't like me being around. They wanted me to go to war. So yes, I was drafted. And I was at Crestwood, Kentucky when that happened. Of course, you had to go through this induction. And then they sent me to Great Lakes, Illinois. And I went through training there. And then I got some special training, if they called it Ranger, that I took at night. And this was a volunteer thing. You get to go do this. So, and it come in handy later on. And then I went from Great Lakes. I went to Solomons, Maryland. It took me 7 days to go from the Great Lakes to Solomons, Maryland on train, past the Ashland, Kentucky train station 7 times, going in different directions. And then after training at Solomons, they shipped me to New York, to Pier 92, where we waited on our ship. The paint on the deck was still wet. You stick on your things, and there was 13 of us, plus 2 officers. And we took it back to New York, to Pier 46. And then after we got some supplies in it, we took off to Norfolk, and then told us that we were going to Pearl, but we got sidetracked and had to go to the Aleutians, but not before we got rid of our gear, because if we didn't get rid of all our heavy gear, the rockets that we carried were too heavy for the ships, the draft. Then from there we went to Pearl, and from Pearl we went down, in between Ellis Island, I don't know what the other island was, and we charted the depth of the water in there, each ship about 200 feet apart, and we measured the depth so that other ships could come through it. And in some places it was 6 foot, and the next maybe a couple of 100 feet you couldn't find the bottom. We went to Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, pulling demolition work. The demolition team, first day in, lost the electrician's mate. So I was lucky enough to draw as his replacement. Now, the team had been trained to swim. I hadn't been trained to swim other than just normal swimming. And sometimes they'd let us off a half a mile out. And those guys carried 70 pounds on their back. And the first night in, I did what they told me. I carried a knife, went in my bathing suit with my sneakers, and that was it. And we went in, and they assigned a guy to me. They told me that if anybody says anything to you, think of a girl's name. Well, the only name I could think of right then was Betty, and that's the name I used. Well, they assigned a guy to show me some ropes, but that night they didn't show me no ropes. They took me up to the tree line with this gentleman, and we saw the Japanese people coming down, getting water. And it happened a time or two, and he says, "Let me see your knife." So I let him see my knife. I still have that knife. And he took it, and the next Jap come down. He went up and he cut the throat, threw him in the buckets in the ocean. And a little while later, there come another one. He killed 7 that night. And of course, the next day, my training really began, and they showed me how to put the composition C into the various locations in the Carl, and showed me how to set the detonators. And we blew. Within I only got to go in with them, maybe 3 or 4 times, and they got a replacement. The reason we put the explosive in the Carl is to blow it up so the other ships could get in without ripping their bottoms out. And we did that. I mean, we did this for 6 weeks before the invasion date. Now, things weren't going just right in Europe. So, Saipan, Guam were supposed to be hit the same day, and they canceled the Guam operation, and we were told to go off out into the ocean, which we did, and we were circling around and had been for a few days. The Japanese come over with a bunch of torpedo bombers, and regardless of all our shooting and everything, one of them got through and dropped. They torpedoed, it hit our sister ship, the 468, and when it hit it, it blew the bow completely off, and it went underwater. The guys that were on the 40s and 20s up there were still shooting, even though the shots were coming out of the water. So we went alongside and took the survivors off of it. Some of the guys didn't live. The fireman's mate, we had to use our dining room tables as operation tables. The doctor was working with a lieutenant who was dead when we brought him aboard, but His wife had just given birth about 2 weeks ago, and he was trying his best to bring him back. Never did. And we buried 6 of those men overboard. After about a couple of days after the burial, we got orders to go to Saipan because they were having trouble. So we had to unload the crew that we took aboard. We took them to another ship, then we went to Saipan. When we got to Saipan, the ocean was red. A lot of human parts were in the water. And then we went on in, did what we had to do, and helped the Marines take back over the invasion. Then the invasion come of Guam, and of course we went in and we put a bunch of rockets in, and then they started landing. And well, of course we had to back off to give them room to get in, but we were there in case they needed us. And while we were backed off, we were of course reloading the rockets. A day or two we saw that things were going, the Marines were going up a hill, and the Japanese were coming out, and they would wave a surrender flag, and the Marines would start up the hill to where these guys were with the surrender flag, and they dropped the surrender flag and opened fire, and they just killed the Marines. Well, the second time this happened, I was up on the con with the captain and executive officer, and I happened to have a pair of the binoculars up there, and we saw them do this again. My captain said something needs to be done. So I don't know. It seemed like now that it was the next day, but I know it was just a few hours. And he called and told me, he said, "You've had that training," and he says, "I think you need to get on the beach." So I got on the beach, and there's a bunch of other guys there. They all been told the same thing. So they said, "Well, while we're here," I said, "the only thing I know," and I told them. They said, "Well, since you know what it is, you lead the charge." Yeah, thanks, But we all had Tommy guns. And I told him, I told him what I saw. I said, well, when he comes out with the flag, I said, as soon as that flag starts dipping, we start shooting. And I said, oh, them bushes. Every guy take him a bush. And as soon as you get your bush, go to another bush. I said, and that guy with the flag's mine. He come out, and they did that. He started to drop the flag, and we cleaned house. And the Marines took over where we left and went on up there and got up in the cave. And they used a flamethrower to get the people out of the cave. A lot of them come out with the flames on them. After Guam, we went back to New Guinea and reloaded and water, food, everything. And then we left there and went to Lady again. We were the first ship in. One of them was put on Mindanao, and I don't know what the name of this little island was, but it was supposed to be heavy occupied. And we went in, didn't find anybody on that island, but Mindanao, they had all kinds of trouble. Then we got the lights up. The thing was, they didn't want to go in through the regular channel, because if it went in the regular channel, it would give us our surprise attack give away. So we went in through the back door up to Lady, and we bombarded it, and then in another hour everybody was landing. We also heard over Armed Forces radio that General MacArthur was on the beach. 3 days later, MacArthur come back, our ship, shook every hand on the ship. He said, well, I'm going in now. So that leaves my mind as to who really went on the first day. Then we went up to, and we went in Manila. And through there, we laid rockets all over Manila. From there, we went back to Pearl, and we got some things we needed, and left there, went to New Guinea. We picked up the convoy at New Guinea, and we're headed to Iwo Jima. We lost a propeller shaft, and we had to drop out of the convoy. We had the bearing that went out on the propeller shaft, but it took us 2 or 3 days to get it. While we were doing that, the invasion of Earl was going on. So when we got back and we were in service, they ordered us to Okinawa. And we got there, we got into Camerata, which is 15 miles from Okinawa. And then our other ships caught up with us, and we would lay smoke at night so that the Japanese could not see the vessels that were in that bay. And we had a hospital ship to come in there. We asked them to darken. They said no. We told them to get out of the harbor. They got out of the harbor and were sunk by Japanese. After the invasion, they put us up on the line halfway between Okinawa and Japan. While we were there, we got our radio knocked out. And when we left, when we were replaced by a destroyer, we come back into the area of Okinawa, and all the flags were at half staff. Not having a radio or anything, we didn't know, so the signalmen were signaling each other. And we found out that President Roosevelt had died. So we went back over to Camerata, still laying smoke at night. and everything. And there was talk that there was some Japanese people up on the hill. So we were assigned to get them out. And we went up there. We did not find them. We saw what we thought was images, and we shot at those. And coming on down, my group and I, we found a cave. So we investigated the cave. And I've got a lantern that I got out of that cave, also a bearing that was on the table outside of the cave where they were building engines and putting them on these suicide boats. We went to Pearl, and they put us in a special bay there, and these 6 ships were outfitted with new screws, new engines, and it was controlled by some new electronic stuff. So they decided that I was to go to Washington to this new school to learn how to use this stuff. And then I was supposed to come back to the ship. Now the ship was supposed to being prepared to go up the Yangtze River. Well, anyway, I got back in the States. I went to Treasure Island 3 or 4 days before they get my things going. And then I got the train tickets and everything to go to home. I had 24 days en route. I got in there about 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was Sunday morning, and I thought, well, my grandfather and all, they'd be gone to church or ready to go to church. And I walked in, he's sitting on the front porch. He said, I was expecting you. A few days after that, a bomb was dropped, and I got orders canceling my school and to go to Philadelphia Naval Yard. So I went to Philadelphia Naval Yard in the discharge barracks there for a while, week or so, and then they told me to go to Newport Rose, Rhode Island. So I did. I was there for a while in the same barracks that my dad was in World War I. And then I was sent to Chicago Pier and discharged. When was I most scared?
Yeah.
Gosh. I don't know, I guess first night on the beach, I guess. I know I felt mighty uneasy, you know, and because I didn't know what to expect. But I will also say this, that all the training I had and the swimming that I did, there wasn't too many people who wanted to fool with me, because I was hard. And I wouldn't pick a fight, but I didn't walk away from it. Well, you know, I did not think about the enemy as a person, really. He was my enemy. If I didn't get him, he was going to get me. And I didn't want him to get me. So, yes, I killed quite a few. And I don't dream about it. It doesn't worry me. That was what I was trained to do. And I tried to do my best. And I don't know if I had to do it again. I guess I'd do it again. I don't know. When the war was over in August, of course, all the towns, they put it out. Well, I was already planning on going somewhere else, and I was going to take the car. My grandfather said, "You can't have the car tonight." Well, I didn't even know why, but he'd heard it over the radio. So I walked on out the road and hitchhiked. I had my little bag with me, take. And sedan delivery come up, and the back stopped. And the doors opened, and some girl hauled out, "Well, I'm going to have me a sailor tonight." Well, I went with them to Louisville, and they had court down there, big thing like that. And I ended up being in different cars. Everybody had you a bottle of whiskey. And when I'd get back near them, I'd hand them the bottle of whiskey. And finally went home with them to their daddy that lived there in Louisville. And I walked in the house, and this gentleman looked at me. He said, "You are Earl Carlin's son?" I said, "Yes, sir." He had worked with my dad on Railway Express. Well, I lost one 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then I lost one just recently. The one that I just come back from, he and I lived next door to each other for about 8 years. He did not know I was in the Navy. I did not know he was in. We were in Bronson, Missouri 4 years ago. And I was sitting at a table, and Gene, my son, was with me. And there was 3 or 4 other people around here, and this is a great big hall, probably 125 feet long. He sat next to me, and I looked at his name. I said, "You know, I had a friend had that same name, but they told me he died." He says, "Well, I'm alive." So the meeting was going on, and he finally said to me, he says, "Where are you from?" I said, "Kentucky." He said, "Whereabouts in Kentucky?" I said, "Louisville." "Whereabouts in Louisville?" I said, "Middletown." "Whereabouts in Middletown?" I said, "Hidden Hills." He looked at my name, he said, "Damn, Earl." The first time I'd seen him in about 50 years. And he just died 2 weeks ago. So, well, Veterans Day to me means that the country is finally owning up to saying thanks for what you did. And not only for me, but for World War I, the Korean, the Vietnam, and the Gulf Wars. Oh, the American flag, I fly it all the time. And I try to, if it's a known dignitary or a real close friend, I'll fly at half staff. But I don't want nobody touching it. And like I said, I'm real touchy about my flags. I think that is something that God give me the opportunity to live in this great country and to fight under this flag. And that's the way I look at it.